here.
Well, you know what, Toby? It tells you,
Yeah,
and it tells me that there's something that's totally unexplainable right there. I mean, and I hate to say it, it kind of goes back towards Bigfoot. I mean, unless there's somebody there at escaped from prison is
yeah.
extremely heavy and extremely tall, and wide and all that stuff. Because I mean, and not to be able to,
Yeah.
with the DNA to break it down to, what species it is, that kind of makes you wonder right there.
Well, I mean, there's telltale signs here. The tapered end is a big one. The fact that a medulla wasn't present is another huge one. Um, the fact that it was a black hair on a visual inspection, but microscopically it was Irish setter red is a huge one, because time and time again those hairs come back as having a red pigment to them. And the red-headed giants is a very well-known topic of old lore. The Native Americans again talking about these red-headed giants. So that to me is a telltale marker. The big one came along when Cindy, I had a conversation with her some days later, and we talked about the evidence that she put forth, including these high-res photos. If anybody is interested in seeing this report, I actually released it during the April 29th episode of Strange-Brau. And you can go on the Al Moon Prints on Facebook. Just type in Al Moon Prints. And I released the entire report with all of her color copies of the microscopic analysis of these 1.5 hairs. But she said something really interesting. She says, was there a tree above these prints, like right above it? And I said, well, I don't know, Cindy. I'll have to go back and check. And so we went back, and there is a very large Doug fir immediately above this, above these set of impressions.
Oh, wow.
And it's about 7 feet up the bank, and it's just sitting on top of the berm, and it's a very large Doug fir. And she says, well, you need to go into that tree, into the bark, and look above, 4 or 5 feet up, and start looking for hair. Because if this was a Sasquatch, it may have gone into that tree. And we found mud and hair in the bark. And it was about 6 feet up. Unfortunately, the hair was lost immediately after we found it, and the wind blew it out of the tweezers, unfortunately. But, it just added credence in our eyes that we were, working with the right person, because how would she ever know that there was a beautiful giant Doug fir right above this set of impressions?
Wow. So that didn't convince you that there's something out there more strange than, I mean, do you physically have to see it? I mean, if you start having like footprints and castings of, what you've gotten, and then a hair sample, it comes back, well, it's not human. It's not any animal we know about. I mean, to me, that would be for a lot of people enough to convince there's something strange going on.
Well, just talking to you, Gary, I mean, I've interviewed so many people. Well, not so many people. I've interviewed a fair number of people. Interviews the wrong word. I've had friendships and relationships with witnesses along the last 11 years, and I can tell when somebody's experienced something. And you're a witness. I mean, you've encountered this, and you still deal with the ramifications of dealing with, what you saw. And so,
well,
yeah.
It ruined my friend Bob at the time.
Yeah.
I known him and his brother. His brother is a famous attorney in Tacoma, Washington, a criminal attorney, matter of fact. And my friend was actually a naturopathic, then decided he wanted to be an MD. And he went through medical school, finished it, whatever, and got his MD. He did his internship. Okay. Right. And his father was a judge. His brother and all that helped fund him to open up a medical practice. And he was so paranoid and shook up, seeing what I seen and going through what I went. All he could think about, his life would be ruined if it got out. I mean, can you imagine you're just opening up a medical practice up in, a certain location, and you're trying to get patients, and all of a sudden if you're labeled, that you saw a Bigfoot that chased you, that's what went in his mind. I lost a good friend over it. We basically, by the time we got back from, the Canadian Rockies, which we decided to cut it short a week and come straight back. By the time we got back home, we made a decision. I'm sorry with each other. We're not going to see each and talk to each other anymore because we don't want this out.
Right.
We were scared it would slip out, and my credibility, his credibility. I only brought it up because, doing the show and talking to other people. And I will say this, I can tell when I talk to somebody when they believe it or they don't believe it, or if they're just blowing smoke at me.
Right.
This by, if you actually have seen one, okay. Now, I can't say every species of a Bigfoot is going to be the same from here to North Carolina to, whatever. I don't know. Just like people are different. All I can say is what I saw. Okay. But when people start telling me different stories that don't even fit anything with what I seen, even the description, the smell, the color, all that stuff, because I'll never forget the smell. I mean, it smelled like urine and musty. Like if somebody had an old carpet and they shampooed it and kind of like got it wet, and the backing, the felt backing underneath the carpet started rotting. That, it was so pungent, even in the car as we drove off. It took a couple minutes with the windows down to get the smell out. It was the most nauseating smell I have ever smelled in my life.
Well, when you brought up your friend that was afraid of losing his practice, it brings up where we're at right now as far as disclosure with everything that's unfolding with the Pentagon and what's happening with Luis Elizondo, who's the ex-Pentagon representative that was covering, over a period of years and $22 million actively studying aerial threat phenomena that the Navy had encountered, the Air Force had encountered over, a period of since Project Blue Book. It turns out that these $22 million was being funneled by Harry Reid to Utah over the Ute tribe's land where Skinwalker Ranch was, which is a completely interesting story that, of course, George Knapp details, and Jeremy Corbell is covering an awesome documentary coming out, I believe, the end of this month. But we stand now at a precipice where we can decide how we're going to move forward here as Bigfoot researchers, because the UFO people are just kicking our ass as far as how this information should be funneled out right now. And are the two phenomena connected? I believe that they are, I mean, if you want to call Sasquatch an alien, fine, call it an alien. It's a hybrid something. And they're involved with, a UFO phenomena, not only with the lights, but with people that have been regressed and talk about seeing Sasquatch in relationship to UFOs, or seeing them, in the bay or the deck of an abduction scenario next to them, as though they're kind of a worker bee, just like we are, some kind of farmed animal out to the ET phenomena. There was UFO and Bigfoot stuff involved at Skinwalker Ranch, along with, these hybrid dire wolves.
Now, going back to the ranch, I actually had a guest on my show that his grandfather was the one that actually started all that. And he was telling on the show a story like how Howard Hughes was involved by supplying, I guess, some equipment and some money and all that stuff at the start.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to get him back on my show here again in August. Unfortunately, during the summertime, he goes up to and lives in Mexico. So he said the internet, kind of like at 5:30 in the afternoon, he loses his internet for some reason. But, he was talking about orbs, and he was even bringing up Bigfoot then, kind of all tying it in. I don't know. We can all speculate. If Bigfoot is alien or involved with alien, or maybe they can produce a sound that can make him go into another dimension
Mm-hmm.
or a different realm? I don't know. We don't know. That's the whole
No.
problem. When
We
I
don't we don't know the specifics, but we know enough of the fact that there's this connective tissue of this other phenomena associated with it, and the omission of evidence by these researchers over this connective tissue, it has to stop. It has to stop for a great many reasons, but it basically has to stop because it's not true. I mean, the stories that they're telling are not true and accurate based upon what the witnesses are having happened over every section of the world, because this phenomena, like Gary Wayne says, is an unsolved riddle on every continent. We should be at a point where we say, okay, 50, 60 years here of being able to film this phenomena, track it, bag it and tag it, for lack of a better way to describe collecting a body. We're not at that point yet where just the average Joe can do this and come forward with the evidence. Really? On every continent over this amount of time, that's not possible yet? And you're not willing to put there being any credence behind a paranormal phenomena? It's disingenuous. And, it's not true. And so for that, I just have to be completely on the different side of the coin than a lot of these guys. And some of these guys are really good friends. We disagree and we still have a good time. There's a way to do that, by the way, for a lot of these flute players. You don't have to, I'll call these guys that are trying to deal with this thing privately on their own. You don't have to be complete morons to them. I mean, imagine yourself being an alpha male trying to wrap yourself around the Bigfoot phenomena alone, let alone having some crazy paranormal encounter happening. It's not fair to do to them. And I've seen, really good people outed by some of these flute players that, they've not only lost friendships, but they've lost a really good connection with a long-term, I don't want to use the word study, but a long-term understanding of the nature of the phenomena. And
well, I honestly feel that some people get so engrossed into it that to the point where it's not even healthy, and then they start embellishing it more and more and more.
Right.
And how can I say it? I've said this before. You go on the internet and you listen to all these paranormal talk shows,
right?
Which there's thousands of them out there, thousands of them. And the problem is a lot of them don't do any research. They don't even know what they're talking about. And they do more damage to the paranormal than they actually do. They actually don't realize that them and their guests actually make fun of the paranormal, to the point if the average person that's halfway into the paranormal, I mean, the only way you get into the paranormal, okay, if ghost or UFOs, and I classify that all paranormal because we don't know what it is, or the Bigfoot, okay, if you've seen a UFO and actually seen one, then they're real. If you had a ghost encounter, then it's real. If you go out and you find Bigfoot prints in the ground, or hear the noises out there, which is totally unaccountable, or like Ron's case, hearing and maybe it was you too, if I got it right, heard a trunk slam or a car door slam. I mean, when there's no places where a car could even be. I mean, it's something out there that it has to be paranormal. There's no other. It can't be anything else.
Well, let's go over the short list. I mean, there's a long list. We'll go over the short one. They follow you home. They'll send, different individuals across the state to find you. That gets into telepathy, or the coconut telegraph. So how does that happen? That happened also to Rich Gurmu. That's why he separated ways with the team he was working with at the time from Harstein Island. He'll talk about that again, like I said, on August 5th. There's the YouTube. I believe he was a deputy sheriff too when all this was happening. Gifts inside of your car after you're out in the woods for 2 or 3 days Bigfooting, and all of a sudden you'll see feathers or rocks sitting on your dashboard. and your car's been locked for a while. Lights coming in your house, following you around after a Bigfoot episode. Strange sound.